Welcome to another edition of the Giles and the Goalies podcast from Wild Extra. We've gotten some things figured out. We've been gone for a long time. We know. We're sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. Trust me, it's been infinitely more frustrating for us than it has been for you. But very beneficial to Grumpies and Roseville. Anyway, so we're joined once again by the other goalie. Charlie is actually in the house, so to speak. Charlie, you haven't been around since about November as far as this podcast is concerned. So what have you done in your time off?
Oh, some little travel. I think I mentioned one week in there that I was in a high-stakes card game. All of that's completely true.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm sure the reality of my life is definitely not as exciting as anybody could ever come up with. But, just thinking about hockey. Thinking about talking to you guys.
Boy.
And Giles, of course, is with us. How's it going, Giles?
I'm all right. Good to see you, Ben. Glad you took time out of your 10 podcasts per week schedule to join us today.
Yeah, I'm a busy guy this week. Sorry, I'm
because he's in demand.
Yeah,
You're a hot commodity.
My comedic wit and my lengths of sports knowledge is a hot commodity right now in this market. So,
have you already done that, by the way? The other?
Yes. Yeah, I did the Hockey Wilderness podcast this week as well.
How did that go?
I went great. It's a good time. We chit-chatted about a lot of different stuff, and it went on tangents that were equally ridiculous to the tangents that we get off on sometimes. So, it was very familiar, actually, just with other dudes.
Oh, boy.
No.
Which doesn't... Yeah, that sounds much worse than it actually is.
No, we're definitely not going to use that content that out of context at all.
No. Why would you do that? That would be incredibly mean.
Mason's going to have a field day with this if he hears that.
It'll be fine. I hope.
We can all hope.
Yeah.
It's a good way to transition out of that to actual hockey talk.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there's a good one.
I thought you had a transition.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So I guess we could transition out of that. And, there's lots of dudes out there. And Charlie wrote about some of them yesterday. Lots of dudes that the Wild could be courting. Is this correct, Charlie?
Well, yeah, thanks for that segue of the year.
Boom.
But yeah, I threw an article out there about the trade deadline and, just kind of what's out there. And it wasn't really an article that was going to say the Wild are going to go trade for necessarily any one of these guys. It was just kind of what the market is and what you might be looking at in terms of giving up to get any of those people that are out there that have been mentioned. And that was the only thing about my list, is that all of those players, and it wasn't necessarily all players that have been mentioned, but all of those players, I had seen articles writing about how they could be available. Even Kimmo Timonen.
Which is kind of shocking. Because it's,
it is,
not...
Well, it is, but it isn't. I mean, he might come back and play, and the Flyers are out of it, I'm sure.
Right.
And he's going to retire at the end of the year, so they may as well ship him somewhere where he might be able to help. I mean, he's a pretty well-respected player around the league. And even last year at 39, he was good. I mean, I think he had like 25 points and still a useful player. He's not a top-line defenseman by any means, but he could help.
Sure. And
he's going to help somebody.
And so out of that article, I think, Tsakiris was probably the most likely, the most desirable, I should say, defender for the Wild to land, just because of his, the cross-section of his ability and the price. But you get the feeling that that's probably not necessarily going to happen anyway.
Well, the negative side of Sekera and what I wrote about it is that for just the reasons you mentioned, he's going to be a pretty popular guy.
Right.
At the trade deadline. I mean, Carolina's going to trade him. I would put money on that. And it's going to turn into a bidding war. And the Wild really can't get into any bidding wars. They have to kind of do this on the shrewd, because their two biggest trade chips right now are their first round draft pick, which may or may not be a playoff draft pick. If it's not a playoff draft pick, it could end up being Connor McDavid, and you don't want to be the guy that gave up Connor McDavid. I mean, that's pretty low probability, but you still don't want to give up your first-round draft pick for the second time in 3 years. And the other guy is Alex Tuch. And if they trade Alex Tuch, I think Chuck Fletcher's house gets burned down within half an hour.
By me.
Yeah, I think that we're all part of that angry mob that probably does that.
That is clear motive right here on the podcast.
Once on the internet, you can't take it back, Giles.
Right.
That's true.
Very good lawyer now.
All right, and Giles, you're actually writing a piece that should drop tomorrow about them acquiring a forward. Are there any interesting names out there on the forward side of things?
Well, as I was conversing with whoever was running Gone Puck Wild today, and the most intriguing name apparently to most Wild fans is Phil Kessel, which makes my head explode.
Yeah.
Because Phil Kessel will never come here.
Right. Well, and also, what are you going to trade to get him, given what I just said?
Right.
I don't know. There's either some really good forwards or there's some really terrible forwards available, and I don't think you want to dip into either. And basically, the summary of my article tomorrow would probably just be the Wild are just better off standing pat. Which, I don't know.
I think the only thing the Wild could maybe use is another guy that can win some draws for them.
Yeah.
And other than Koivu, their face-off percentage is really not that great. I mean, if they could find a cheap guy that can win draws and play on the fourth line, just so you don't have to put all that pressure on Koivu in the playoffs, I'd say that's worth it. But I'm with Giles. Don't go nuts for this trade deadline.
I guess the hot name out there is Sean Bergenheim of Florida, who's being healthy scratched every night. Apparently he has good Corsies and Fenwicks and all that kind of fun junk, but he's being healthy scratched, so clearly something's not right with him, and Florida wants at least like a third-round pick for him, which I don't think the Wild have.
No, they just gave it up for Devin Dubnyk.
That's right. So, stand pat.
Yeah, I think that tends to be everyone's most logical conclusion is kind of like, well, this team is I don't know, and it's something that I said on the Hockey Wonders podcast as well, where it's like, is there anything that's really going to put them over the top where they will definitely make the playoffs versus not making the playoffs? Because right now they're, depending on how you look at it, around a 50-50 shot, I think might even be a little generous. But anything, I mean, you're not going to pay, like you said, Alex Tucker, a first-round pick, and that's the only thing that's going to land you something where it's like, yeah, this team's definitely making the playoffs now because they acquired, blank, this guy or that guy. I just don't think that's something that Wild fans want to see this team pay, and I think that their odds making the playoffs as is are just as good as, or not much worse than trading for, a third line forward or even a lower tier second line forward, I guess.
I think everybody tends to look at a season as 82 games as all one big lump.
Yeah.
That's really not the case. I mean, your team changes about every 20 games.
Right.
You look at the Wild over the last 15, 20 games, the best team in the league because they have a goalie now.
Right.
So that makes the rest of their team better, and they win games. So do you really need to add to that? Do you really need to mix that up? We're not talking about the Wild that we're playing on the ice around January 1st anymore. That team literally doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
The teams get better and worse throughout the year. What's that, John?
Mumps free.
Mumps free, yes. The team is very importantly mumps and norovirus free, so that's a big change.
Goalie laden. Yeah. At least they have one.
Well, that's just it. They have one, and that's about it, because they clearly are going out of their way to not start Darcy Kemper down the stretch, and probably even better yet, for buyout's sake, healthy scratch Nicholas Backstrom every night as well. So that's just kind of where we're at with the goaltending situation. Are you concerned at all about them wearing Dubnyk down?
I'm not. solely for the purpose of, goalies wear down when they play 70 games.
Yeah.
How many did Dubnyk play before he got here? 15?
20.
He's still barely putting in a half season.
Sure.
So I'm sure he's fine with it. You know what I mean? And they're not playing a lot of back-to-backs. I know they did that last week, and we all didn't like it necessarily, but it is what it is. And he played well that night, so I mean, I guess in hindsight, it was a good idea. But it's just not the case of a goalie wearing down in February, March because he's been ridden all year. He was a backup before he got to the Wild, so I'm sure he's got enough left in the tank.
Yeah, I was kind of on the ledge of insanity when they started him in that back-to-back, but I think it was your string of tweets that brought me down off the ledge.
Ben's or mine?
With yours.
Oh.
Ben usually adds fuel to the fire of my insanity. I'm just kidding.
I do.
Wait, does that mean I'm the voice of reason?
Well, yeah, that's...
All right, then.
When you're not playing backgammon in Morocco, you're the voice of reason.
Backgammon in Morocco. It's high-stakes backgammon in Morocco. Mind you. I don't even remember what I said. Can you remind me?
It was just, I don't know, you just threw out there how few games he's played, and
oh yeah,
it was just basically everything you just said.
Right.
So I'm fine with it. It'll be interesting to see if Kemper does get a start at any point from here on out in a back-to-back. But
well, we play Edmonton twice in the next 3 games, so if there was a time to play him, now would be the time.
Yeah.
I would say that he's much more likely to get in once the Wild have achieved a playoff spot.
Problem with that is that it might not happen the last day of the season.
Yeah, then it might not happen.
Right.
It all kind of depends. I'm sure that they ask Evan Dubnyk how he feels every day.
Yeah.
And if he says he feels fine, then he's got the job.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little bit of concern about him wearing down. Just the fact that if he does end up, somehow, which I doubt, I think Kemper sneaks into, hopefully one of these Oilers games. But I think, if Dubnyk starts 40-some games straight, I would be a little bit concerned about that, especially if we were headed into the playoffs and he's looking at a 40-some game starting streak. That's something that's mildly concerning to me. Like you said, it's on the whole of the season, it's not like he started 70 games plus, but I would prefer him to get, obviously it's tough to give him a day off because then you kind of have to assume that the team loses with Darcy Kemper in nets because that's what we're used to. So, but other than that, it's I don't know. I'd like to see him get just a couple of games off, just a couple, just to kind of ease my mind about it.
And they can kind of pick their spot too.
Yeah.
Say they have a game. I haven't really looked at the schedule that closely, so I don't know when this would come up. But say they have a game on a Sunday which he plays, then they might have a game on a Tuesday which he doesn't, and then they don't play again until maybe that Friday or Saturday. All of a sudden, you're turning a game off into 4 days off, and that's a huge deal. So they may be just kind of waiting for that type of scenario where one game turns into a significant amount of rest for the player. Not just, hey, we gave him the second night of a back-to-back off, but he really only gets 2 days away from being in an NHL game because they may be playing 3 games in 4 nights.
Well, they do have a back-to-back coming in a couple weeks here where they play in Washington and then the following night in Carolina. So
could be one.
Yeah, a back-to-back in Carolina, with travel, that could be a decent spot, but I mean, you're still with a road game, it's still kind of a risk, I guess.
I'm pretty sure that's actually a shorter trip than the distance between Edmonton and Calgary.
Or here in Winnipeg, probably, yeah.
See to Raleigh is really only about a 5-hour drive.
Oh, okay. Well, so then even without travel, I mean, you're still on the road.
Don't quote me on that, but having actually made that drive a handful of times,
yeah,
I don't remember it being that long.
Sure. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll see what they end up doing. I think we will see Darcy Kemper, maybe once or twice, 3 times tops, probably to finish out the season with, 28-ish games left, 27, something like that. 25 games left.
I'd be so terrified when Kemper finally does play just for him to make that first save. He can make that first save and then kind of get going. I'd be all right, but that first save will just frighten me to no end.
Right. Well, that's the thing with Kemper's. I mean, you were either getting, a stand on his head, steal the game kind of night, or you were getting 2 goals in 4 shots. I mean, there really was no in between with him. He wasn't slow and steady like Backstrom, where eventually they'd get 3 goals on him, but it wouldn't happen right away. And he's obviously hadn't played like Dubnyk has been playing, where he's just kind of super solid and maybe lets in 1 or 2, but it was either 2 within the first 10 minutes of the game, or it was 1 the whole game, and then 30 plus saves.
Yeah, I mean, Kemper too. That going back to that Winnipeg game, given all the fears that we have about Kemper, and I think they're pretty legit.
Yeah,
you really wanted to throw him in the back-to-back, second game of the back-to-back, for a game that was so important that I think it actually got record TV ratings for the Wild.
Yeah, it did.
Because that would have been a horrible spot to throw him in. I mean, you want to finish off what's left of his confidence. If he has a bad night there, that's it. So you can see why they started Dubnyk that night.
Yeah, and it made sense after you saw how the Wild played too. Because talk about dead legs. I mean, that was second half of a back-to-back effort. If anybody ever saw it.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to Dubnyk for a second, because it's a nice transition.
Yeah.
Into Devan Dubnyk's new technique that at least I know I found today on the web. I'm sure others did too. There's an article on NHL.com about how he's using something called, what was it called again?
Head trajectory.
Head trajectory.
Which sounds...
They didn't really explain in the article what head trajectory was.
No, I mean, they kind of did. It was basically, from what I gathered, it was moving your head and not just your eyes to track the puck, which... I mean, sounds kind of simple, and that's basically what they said. They're like, yeah, we get it, we know it sounds kind of simple, but it's not. There's more to it than this, and they obviously didn't go into great detail because, they weren't getting paid to go into great detail. So, it was really fascinating for me too, and the fact that they called it the biggest advancement in goaltending since the butterfly was, pretty much shocking for netminders such as ourselves. Statements. Yeah, it's up there. That's up there with the bold statements.
I mean, basically, here's your progression of hockey goalie advancements: face masks,
yeah,
non-deer hair pads,
yep,
the butterfly, and then apparently this now.
Right.
But I mean, that's it. Those are your signposts in goaltending technology and advancement. So if they're comparing this to the butterfly.
Yeah,
it's huge. I mean, the butterfly changed the game forever. The butterfly is the reason why scoring is down. That is the one biggest reason why scoring has dropped since the 80s.
I mean, you can almost see, because the butterfly really took hold in the, I guess you could say, the late 80s, and then absolutely exploded in the early 90s. And you can literally watch, the goals per game average absolutely nosedive after that, basically. And certainly, equipment has, a fair amount to do with that, too, because they weren't using the giant, ugly brown pillows like they were, back in the day. But,
easy on the ugly.
There is a classic look to them, I'll give you that. But, some of them got kind of nasty. So, but I mean, it's fascinating to me, and I think it's easy, to point that out and be like, well, that's why Dubnyk is doing so well. And it's like, well, I don't know that it's necessarily that. I mean, he's always been a pretty talented guy, and he's a 6'6" goaltender that can move fairly well for his size. So, I mean, there's a lot of good things to him besides just this head trajectory business. And I've actually written, a couple of different articles about him, this past week about him falling off a little bit. He got here in his first 10 games. His save percentage was, north of 940, and over his last 5 games, it's been right around the 920 mark. So he's
still good.
Yeah, it's still good, which is exactly what the Wild need. And I don't want people to get it wrong when I wrote that, saying like, oh, he's terrible now. No, not at all. He's still, playing a slightly above average NHL goaltending game, which is exactly what this team needs, as opposed to the roller coaster that Kemper put us on. And it just, to the point is that he's not going to be stealing as many games, was my point, because, I still didn't feel like the team was playing as well in front of him as it seemed, as we had hoped.
And only with all the more injuries that seem to accrue,
right.
The team certainly isn't going to play any better anytime soon.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, we just lost another one seemingly last night. Jared Spurgeon left the ice. Looked to me like he was clutching his jaw or part of his face. Not exactly sure. But that could be a huge loss depending on how long he's out. I mean, he's really been phenomenal this year. I mean, that the whole top four defensive core has just been outstanding after that little stretch early in the season where they seemed to never play together. Since then, they've been rock solid, and losing him is going to be kind of a big deal if it's any extended period of time.
Yeah, I mean, he is. I mean, obviously, probably one of the top four most important players the Wild have, skaters anyway. The optimistic side of me wants to believe that maybe this time around, I mean, hopefully he is not out for too long. And if it's, an upper body injury, you honestly hope it's a broken jaw.
Right.
Because, they'll just put a cage on him in a week and he'll be back.
Right.
But if he is out, the optimistic part of me really wants to believe that we'll be a little better off this time because Matt Dumba has played really well over the last couple of weeks and scored a great goal last night. More assertive but smarter, which is really what they wanted, why they sent him down in the first place. And he's not Jared Spurgeon, and we're not asking him to be Jared Spurgeon, but if he can mitigate that loss just a little bit, they won't be as rudderless as they were when Spurgeon was out earlier because, he brings a lot to the table, Jared Spurgeon.
Yeah. Kind of going back to Matt Dumba, I thought he was fantastic last night, more so defensively than he was with his goal. And I don't know if he had an assist or not, but he had a couple of crucial plays in the third and overtime to prevent a goal for Calgary.
Yeah, I think the official word was did not get an assist on the overtime winner, but it doesn't happen without him.
Yeah, right. No, that's exactly it. If there was a third assist, he definitely would have got it.
Scandella, who then got it to whoever else, then got it to Coyle to Koivu.
Yep.
So you can't get the third assist, but that was a team goal. So.
Yeah, it really was, and something that they, that you see a lot in the overtime where they'll have a big save, and then there's a good clear like that, and with 4-on-4 hockey, it just kind of you're playing a little more pond hockey than the regular game right there at that point. So it makes for exciting plays like that, and that finish by Koivu was pretty outstanding. But as Aaron Lipinski wrote about today, you have to give the assist on that one to Johnny Hockey for letting it bank off of him and into the net.
Yeah, he was. Aaron was not happy with
No,
Gaudreau.
He was not.
No. He hardly says anything on Twitter, and he came out of Twitter hibernation to just straight blast Johnny Hockey for 5 minutes.
Well, we've got to remember who we're dealing with here. Aaron is a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And he's really soft-spoken, all of the time.
Yep. Yeah.
He's very, very smart about hockey. He's a coach, and he knows his stuff, and he writes really great articles, tactical articles.
Yeah.
But you hardly ever see him get worked up about this stuff. And the funny thing is, I didn't really have that big a problem with what Gaudreau did.
No.
Yeah, the whistle had sort of gone.
Yeah.
But, first of all, they never should have blown the whistle on that play, so the Wild caught a huge break. And, what's he supposed to do? Any forward that's in that spot is going to be trying to put it in the net. So, I just thought it was funny.
Oh, I did too. It was just that. It really kind of came out of nowhere, especially for him. Like a guy where you see, maybe a tweet a week from, and then he just absolutely blows up and just starts dishing out scorching hot takes on Johnny Hockey out of nowhere. And it was fantastic. And then I think he took it upon himself to write that article. I don't know that he was even necessarily scheduled to write an article that night, but he absolutely went after Johnny Hockey the next day in his article, which was outstanding.
He went to Charlie Coyle. We get, angry Aaron just.
That's a good parallel.
Either that or we all need to apologize to him tomorrow.
Yeah, that too.
He really is like the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah, no, very nice guy. Outstanding.
Yeah. Good talk.
This is great because we've got video of Giles here too, and Giles is like leaning back,
Yeah.
the back of his head,
Soaking
like,
it in.
relaxed, and he's like, "Yeah, this is going great, guys."
Yeah. The only thing we're missing is some killer appetizers from Grumpy's.
Yeah.
Well, what is our next topic? I don't know.
Well, we can talk about, a guy that we haven't really mentioned but was called up this week was Michael Karanen. Not, super well known amongst the Wild Faithful, obviously, but guys like us obviously are aware of him. He was called up pretty much as Vanek insurance, is what I gathered, and then not used in the Calgary game. But I haven't seen that he's been sent down yet. I don't think he has. So...
No, I don't think he has.
Yeah, I don't think he has. So, you guys think that we see him at some point? Who do they scratch for him even? If Vanek continues to be healthy, I guess.
I would certainly like to see him get a shot. Usually when they call these kids up, they really only start them on the fourth line or third line or whatever. But for whatever reason, with him, they're more insistent that he play on a skill line.
Right.
Which I think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot because Stefan Veilleux is just kind of he's as good as a traffic cone right now. It's just not fun watching everyone fly around him and pretty much have their way. Whereas with Karanen, he has the speed to match anyone, really. He's a pretty quick guy. He has good hands, good offensive skills. The thing with him was his defense, which he has somewhat cleaned up in Iowa. So I would certainly hope we see him get a shot.
I don't have a lot of experience watching him play.
Mm-hmm.
Really only at the development camp, where I was really impressed by his offensive skills and decision-making when he has time and space. I don't know if he'll get as much time and space in an NHL game. Maybe against Edmonton.
Yeah.
As he would at the development camp, where he's playing against a lot of guys who are not on NHL contracts and never will be.
Right.
But if he plays on a skill line, plays with players, then I think he can be useful. I don't know. He's small. He's not going to bring you a lot on a fourth line, so
no.
I can see why they're not doing it. I agree with Giles. Stefan Veilleux is not an NHL player, and I think I've sounded off about this before. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he gets in, where they put him, and what he can do. Because I think he's an intriguing player. Obviously, he's put up a ton of points in Finland.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ben.
he's kind of got the reputation a little bit of as a dangler. I don't know how accurate that is, or like you said, how much that translates to the NHL game. But I think it's the Wild are kind of stuck with him because they're stuck with without Carter, and then with Schrader playing as well as he has, especially with scoring, they don't really have a whole lot of guys they can. I guess they could demote Fontaine down to the fourth line again, but that doesn't really necessarily seem all that fair, and he's been playing a little bit better as of late after being healthy scratched for a couple of games straight there. But they really are kind of stuck with Karanen as long as they have, as long as the quote-unquote top six is healthy.
Well, in that case, do you send him back down and bring up somebody like Graovac, who can play on a lower line and be effective because he's a bit more physical?
Right.
I would rather see Graovac or anybody else, Brett Sutter, over Veilleux. I just don't get it with Veilleux. He's got to have pictures of somebody.
Yeah. Hey. Fun fact I learned about him today was he played 5 games in the 02-03 season for the Wild. That was his breaking into the NHL year.
Yeah.
And he's still around. We got rid of him, but to bring him back, like every other team in this state that brings back old players. The the Wild brought the least useful one back in their history.
Are you subtly referencing Kevin Garnett?
Kevin Garnett, Torrey
Torrey
Hunter.
Hunter.
Yeah.
I think the Vikings tried Randy Moss for 3 games at one point too.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Well, Veilleux is really interesting in how he ended up being part of the Wild organization in the first place. I mean, he was drafted by, I want to say Toronto. It was a year where, and I don't know if this is still part of it, Niels, in the CBA, but I guess it might be. But he was a junior player, and he and Kyle Wanvig, if you remember Kyle Wanvig, were both guys who never signed their original drafted teams. I think Wanvig was Boston and Veilleux was Toronto. I really want to think that was true. And so they went back into the draft, and the Wild picked them both up. And everybody was really excited about it because I think they were drafted higher than the Wild got him the first time around. And then it turned out it was Stefan Veilleux and Kyle Wanvig, who I think is still kind of the gold standard for guys who got scratched while being part of the Wild. Like press box time. Like Stu Bickle's working on it, but that's still Kyle Wanvig memorial seat in the press box. I've heard that term used.
Oh man.
Wasn't he huge?
Or Matt Foy. Matt Foy was another one.
Yes. Matt Foy. God.
Oh God. You just think of all these scratches. There's Matt Foy, I think Mark Chouinard.
Yes, Mark Chouinard.
I think we should just spend the rest of the podcast naming obscure Wild players from the 2001 to 2007 era.
I like it.
I can clean up in this.
Kelly.
We could talk about them in the vein of the Wild bringing them back.
Right.
You know, a la Kevin Garnett.
I want to know what Bill McCult is up to these days. I don't know about you guys.
Hey, never forget, Keith Carney has set the Wild plus-minus record for 1 year.
Playoff hero Keith Carney to you. Keith Carney, Richard Park, Michael Granlund, and Nino Niederreiter. Those are and Pierre-Marc Bouchard. I think those are your playoff heroes.
Keith Carney had more goals in that playoff series than Marian Gaborik did.
He did. 1.
Yikes. Woof.
Well, this is way off topic. I don't want to keep this going any longer than we have to, but the Wild are still young enough where we probably remember all of their obscure players. Canadian fans can't do this.
Yeah.
No. Wild fans and Columbus fans can probably do it. Columbus probably has more like that guys than anybody else in the NHL.
Right. I actually have a poster of their inaugural team.
The Wild?
Yeah, complete with names and numbers on the flip side of the poster.
We probably have the same poster, man.
Yeah, I still have it. It's in my basement. That would be a horrific trip down memory lane. Well, it's got Jamie McLennan and then Manny Fernandez looking like he's pouting and all of those players.
What's so abnormal about that?
Andy Sutton. Who else was? Jim Dowd, of course. Can't forget Jim Dowd. Darby Hendrickson. Blah blah blah.
Lubomir Sekerish.
Lubomir Sekerish, yes. AJ Nielsen.
AJ Nielsen.
Or no.
DC Roast.
Who's it? Adam Nielsen?
Jeff Nielsen.
Jeff Nielsen. I don't know.
He's one of us. Get it right.
Sorry. It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. Right. That's enough of that.
Yeah, that's probably good to pump the brakes on that quote-unquote segment.
Good news, everybody. The Capitals are up 5-1 on the Jets.
All right.
That'll pump the brakes on that.
Yeah. That's good news.
I think I was watching earlier, Blake Wheeler took a puck to the inside of his knee and had to be helped off.
Ooh.
Oh, really?
It did not look good.
The Jets are getting hammered by injuries. They lost Perreault the other day. Drew Stafford played like 2 games and then got hurt. They're limping along.
Yeah, and they already had like 4 or 5 guys on the injury list before that. It's like, I can't think. Enstrom. I think Enstrom's out. I could be wrong. Klitzem.
Let's bring that to like a playoff topic because this has always been something that I've been thinking about. we have all these teams that are in playoff spots right now that, were not playoff teams last year. And I think, when you have playoff teams that are new, even though, teams like Vancouver have been there recently.
Sure.
Everybody's kind of waiting for them to fade.
Yep.
Like it's a done deal that it'll happen. But I think, this year, that's going to happen. First of all, Vancouver's also losing right now.
Woo.
I won the Rangers late, which is awesome. But, of the teams, and probably we're talking Winnipeg, we're not talking about Nashville anymore, obviously.
No.
Winnipeg, Vancouver, and Calgary. Do you see any of those teams as vulnerable, or are they actually as good?
I think the Jets can fall just because injuries are really starting to plague them, and for whatever reason, the Jets are really hell-bent on continuing to start Andrei Pavlik.
Yeah.
It's terrible how much enjoyment I get of watching them shoot themselves in the foot every night by starting him in goal.
That's not so terrible.
Yeah.
They are your rival team.
Right.
Yeah, one of them, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Michael Hutchinson's obviously having a phenomenal year. So, hey, they want to start Pavlik, have at it. As far as I'm concerned, my team would be the Flames, just based on, not to say that they're not talented, but they kind of have a little bit of, like, they're just not. You don't know exactly how they got where they're at with the talent that they have. They've got some good players here and there, but nobody that really jumps off the page at you, unless you have a disproportionate hate for Johnny Hockey, I suppose. But Jonas Hiller is playing good, but I don't think that anybody's going to confuse him for a elite goaltender that's going to change a team. But it seems to me like Calgary is one of the teams that I would kind of look for to maybe fall off a little bit if that were to happen, because I just don't know how they're doing it. And I saw a stat about their third period wins. They've won 10 or 11 games in the third period this year, and their fancy stats are just kind of off the charts as far as puck luck goes in the third period. So I think that they're not entirely smoke and mirrors, because they're not a terrible team, but they're a little more smoke and mirrors than some of those other fresh playoff teams like Vancouver and Winnipeg.
Their fancy stats kind of remind you of Colorado last year.
Exactly.
They apparently stumbled upon that horseshoe Colorado had until Game 7 of the playoffs.
Right.
They found it because it's working.
There's always the team that has that. I mean, the 2002-2003 Wild were that team. I mean, that team was awful. They had one good player. They turned it into a Western Conference Finals team. I mean, there's always going to be that team where things go right for them. And I think this year there's actually been more than one. I mean, unless this is the year where all of Winnipeg's seemingly talented parts came together as a whole, and that's what we're witnessing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could put them in that category too.
Yeah, and the fact that they're doing it without any semblance of Evander Kane, and then obviously shipping him out to Buffalo is kind of a little more on the miraculous side than anything. I mean, you would have figured if Winnipeg was in a playoff spot the way they are right now, preseason, you would have assumed that Evander Kane is, an all-star / whatever, top 10 in points in the league or something along those lines, where he had a big season, but that obviously isn't the case, and obviously has gone laughably wrong for the Winnipeg Jets and turned into, what I thought was kind of a mutually beneficial trade with them and the Sabres.
Yeah, I mean, that's been building for a long time.
Right.
He hates it there.
Yeah.
And he's not the kind of guy who apparently is going to put up with that, not being happy somewhere. Which is, that's troubling if you're trying to pick him up. But
Right.
But I think, given the fact that everybody knew that he didn't want to play in Winnipeg, Cheveldayoff did an amazing job of getting something back for him.
Right.
It's going to be a late first-round pick, but it's a first-round pick nonetheless. And Tyler Myers. And who cares if they get anything out of Stafford? But, I mean, that right there, Myers and the late first-round pick probably would have been a good haul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have given that up for Evander Kane, a guy that you don't know. He might be just as unhappy in Buffalo.
Right.
So he said all the right things so far, but he also has played for them yet. So
We'll see what he says when McDavid's on his wing. Or center.
yeah, true.
Same difference.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that him coming back next year, with said McEichel possibilities is probably going to go a long way towards making him happy. But for some reason, the front office there just never was a big fan of his either, and the coaching staff also. It was kind of a weird deal how that continued to exist until finally the trigger was pulled. And I mentioned this on the Hockey Wilderness podcast where it's like it's not a good trade for the Wild because they got something out of Kane, who was going to give them nothing the rest of the year. They got Stafford and Myers, who are not going to light the world on fire, but productive NHL players that could very well tilt the scale just a little bit towards Winnipeg making it into the playoffs versus not, as opposed to an injury reserved Evander Kane.
Well, I guess the one thing we have to remember about that too is that is the Myers Bogosian thing, is that a wash?
That's kind of what a lot of people have said. Yeah,
I think Myers is better.
I guess from what I've read, Bogosian was kind of tilting in the same direction as Kane, where he was kind of not a popular figure in the locker room. So it probably did more for team chemistry to swap him for Myers. So maybe that's a little more of a win for them.
I always seem to miss out on that post-player departure. The information about their negative side gets leaked into the press. I mean, obviously with Kane, everybody already knew, but a player like Bogosian, they might have kept it under wraps.
Yeah.
And you see Minnesota teams do this all the time. After Torrey Hunter left the first time, that's when you found out that Torrey Hunter punched Justin Morneau or all the way around or whatever. All the stuff that was negative about them being there, that's when it comes out. Because now people can tell the media about it and you don't have to worry about the ramifications anymore. So I think it's kind of weak to do that. If you're going to keep that stuff in the locker room, do it after they're gone too.
Right.
I found the story about Byfuglien throwing his tracksuit in the shower kind of hilarious, but I'm also not the biggest proponent against bullying, and I'm more into that kind of twisted comedy. So I guess maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one with bullying because Kane broke a rule.
Right. Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily bullying.
60 games into the season. Most NHL teams have this rule: dress professionally. You're going to work.
Right.
You know what I mean? And he had to willingly break that rule. And I don't know if that's bullying other than somebody just saying, hey, we have a rule and this is what it's going to take to get you to follow this rule. That's the message we're going to have to send. Don't wear this here again. I think that's different from bullying.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Very anti-bullying. I don't want to see anything that is actually bullying, but I think that's just sort of a guy not learning the lesson through conversation. You have to send a stronger message. If he had just done it and thrown his tracksuit in the shower because he doesn't like Evander Kane, that's bullying.
Yeah, I suppose. There's a distinction to be made there.
I don't know. They're all rid of each other, so I guess it's okay.
And now we get the viral picture of Byfuglien flipping Kane off, and that we get to enjoy that after the fact.
Was that out there?
Yeah. I don't know what the context is of it, but who knows? Who cares?
Right? Yeah, it's just him flipping off anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Could be photoshopped. Who knows? He might be flipping off, like a child molester or something. I guess. It could be something completely excusable, and they just put poor Evander Kane in there.
Speculating as to what he was. No, I'm pretty sure it was Hitler, guys.
Had to be Hitler.
I was flipping off Hitler's ghost.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a ton of sense. Wow.
You just say it was from last year and he was flipping off Claude Noel, who was not pictured.
Yeah, entirely possible.
Yeah.
Anyway. What is left on our hit list?
We have a hit list?
Topics.
I mean, we kind of hit on everything in the trade deadline, and Spurgeon, Dubnyk. Yeah. I don't know that we have a whole lot. We could go crazy with other stuff, I guess, but like high school hockey or whatever, if you guys want. I'm certainly the least most expert of the group on that, so.
I'm certainly no expert on high school hockey. I pay somewhat attention to it, but I'm no expert.
Well,
so does that make me the expert? I did actually spend my day yesterday at the high school hockey tournament.
Yeah.
For work. Well, I was at 1.5 games, I guess. I was there for a very specific reason, but nothing to do with Wild Extra.
Right.
I was thinking about going back tomorrow because they gave me a media pass. Might as well use it.
Sure.
Right.
But I might write something up about some of the games that I see. There's some interesting stories. I mean, this is obviously the girls' tournament right now.
Yeah.
There's a really cool story with one of the players from South St. Paul. And her last name is Karg, and I think her first name is Nikki. This is a girl who actually just beat leukemia like mid-season this year, right before the season or something like that. She's been playing. I don't know how much she's been playing, but she's back with the team and she's there at the state tournament. So that was kind of a cool little piece of human interest about that girl getting back out on the ice. But there's some interesting stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, it was when I did those 2 posts this last week. I didn't know a whole lot going in, but then afterwards, I came out of it going, I should really go down and try to watch some games on Friday or even Saturday. And it turns out I'm not going to have time to go at all. So I'm rather bummed that I'm not going to get to see any of these games.
Yeah, I don't know how much I'll get to see over the next couple of days. I can really only go during the day tomorrow, so I'd see the Class A games. But I don't know. Right now, I think it's down to Red Wing and I'm trying to remember who won the first game. Blake and Red Wing, and then Thief River Falls, who was the top seed, and South St. Paul.
And, so all the top seeds.
Yes.
Top 4 seeds, I should say.
I did not see either Red Wing or Blake play, but I did see Thief River Falls.
I saw the updates on that.
Impressive. Actually set
Blake
a record for shots in a game last night in the quarterfinals against New Ulm. I think they had 58 or something like that. And I think they only scored 4. I think they won 4-1. The New Ulm goalie had a great night, but they announced it over the intercom up in the press box that they were about to set a record. They had about 6 minutes left, and the camera guy I was there working with, we were pretty sure that was a lock from that point on.
Right.
They were spending the entire game in New Ulm zone. But that's a pretty good team, Thief River Falls. I think all 4 of the teams that are left are pretty good.
Yeah, I saw the updates from the Blake game. I forget who they played in the first game, but they allowed 3 shots.
Yeah, the quarterfinals of the state tournament, this happens in the boys' side too, maybe not as drastic.
Yeah.
The quarterfinals are such a random hodgepodge of teams.
Right.
I mean, chances are any section final is a closer game than the state quarterfinals because there are just some sections that there's not a lot of hockey there.
Right.
I mean, you think about Southwest Minnesota.
Yeah.
And, the teams from up north can be a really random group. They could be amazing, or they could be
terrible.
Just the best of what's around because it's a lot of small towns and it's still kind of old-fashioned.
Well, now they do these top 5 seeds, they kind of make sure that the top seeds aren't playing each other in the first round, and the worst teams are getting matched up against the better teams. So you're going to get more blowouts than one would really care for, but it makes for outstanding games on Friday and Saturday.
Sure. Well.
So
I'm sure we'll have more to talk about with the boys tournament in a couple of weeks, just because, there's so much more information about boys hockey. They're not marginalize the girls at all, because they're obviously been a lot of good hockey players that's come through you're probably more likely to get yourself at least to the Olympics coming through the Minnesota girls high school hockey tournament than you are the boys at this point.
Yeah, that's for sure.
True.
So probably in pretty short order. A lot of those Olympians are 19, 20 years old.
Oh boy. Vancouver tied the game with 2 minutes left, and it's in a shootout.
God damn it.
Continue our scoreboard watch. Well, I think the more important thing is that the Jets have lost tonight. I mean, Vancouver, all those Pacific Division teams, that's great, but if the Wild can catch Vancouver, they don't have to worry about it, really.
Yeah.
And then Michael Russo just tweeted that Christian Folin did not play tonight for Iowa.
Ah.
The team hasn't announced his call-up, but he did not play at Iowa, so...
Where is Iowa right now? Where are they playing? Are they at home?
I wanted to say they were in, like, Charlotte or somewhere. Let me look. I know they played tonight. They lost.
So a nice short
surprise. Yeah. Charlotte.
Hop on a plane, kid.
Yeah, and then another one. And then another one.
Right. 3 different sizes.
Direct from Charlotte to Edmonton.
Ugh.
My favorite.
Air NHL.
Well, that'll actually do it for this week's edition of the Wild Extra Giles and the Goalies podcast. Thanks for joining us, and as always, you can find great work from Charlie, Giles, and myself at Wild Extra, along with some other fantastic writers. And
a whole host of them.
Yes, piles of writers, some of which who may or may not hate Johnny Hockey. Otherwise, that'll do it for now. We should be back to a pretty regular weekly schedule now that we've kind of got some technical issues somewhat resolved, I would say, and we'll hopefully be coming back at you again next week. So look forward to that, and thanks for listening.